Okay, students, so this is the first of a couple of different write-alongs that I'm gonna do. So what is a write-along? Think of it like a sing-along, right? You follow along with the lyrics. Well, in a write-along, I'm gonna show you kind of the way that I would write this paper, and you can kind of follow along with your own essay, trying to do some of the things that I'm doing or trying something different. If you're like, you know what, Bonnie, that part of the write-along, I'm not really feeling it. I want to do my own thing. Do your own thing. But if you're like, I want a little bit more guidance, that's what these are for. I've cut up the write along into just like different little sections of the inclusion of a secondary source to follow along with the assignment. So the first thing we're gonna do for this write along is we're gonna go look at the assignment on Blackboard, because this weekend you have to complete your third draft before the start of class, which is coming up this coming week. So we're gonna go to Blackboard. And we're going to go to project 2. And we're going to go to week 6 because that's where the homework is. And we're going to go ahead and look for it where it says Thursday homework, or if you're on my Wednesday class, Wednesday homework, third draft. And, we got a bit of writing here, kind of just saying we're heading into this part of the writing. It's been a lot of work up until now, and we collected all this information, and now we're going to start writing about it. So if we kind of break down the requirements for this particular assignment, I want a discussion of your research question, which you already have, and how it came from your Nexus event. Give me the detail of that Nexus event, which you already have. That was done in draft 2. If you haven't, or if you have more of a drawing for draft 2, you might want to start fleshing that out into its own paragraph or 2. The analysis of your literacy Nexus event, that's just break it down. How did it affect you? And then, of course, now I want you to start including 2 sources. So we're kind of going from talking about yourself, what you experienced, how that led you to your question, and now how that's leading you outwards to search for information from other people, get different points of view. And that's what your 2 sources are going to be. So essentially what you're going to do in this next chapter, this next section, or this next chapter, you're going to say, hey, I went to go look for information. Here's what this guy says. Here's what this guy says. So how do we begin doing that? We got to include the 2 sources. They have to be from either the library, UTRGV library, Google Scholar, or TED Talks. If you use the AI, you might want to do a backward search to make sure that it's in there, because if it's not from those areas, it's going to affect your paper. You don't get a comment from me saying, yeah, this one doesn't count. Eventually, we'll include the interview, and I'll give you that information. So we include the 2 sources. We want to do a quick summary of each and a critical analysis of each, which is just, how do I know that this source is credible? Like, what is the credibility? And what's the relationship between the source and my question? So how does it kind of help me answer my question, or how does it inform me about, what my question's all about, or parts of the topic of my question? And then, of course, I'll talk about what's next for me. What are the things I still want to do? So that's my third draft. I'm probably adding half a page to a page of information to it, depending on how much I want to write about my sources. So I'm going to go to my second draft, and I'm going to begin with that. And so this is my second draft. I started talking about my Nexus event when I was little, and how I failed a standardized test. And then I kind of talk about its impact on me, and how I kind of start to explore that experience a little bit more. And I lost the question part. I think I deleted too much. Yeah. And then, of course, right here, let me delete this old version. In this third paragraph is where I start talking about how it leads into my question, what I think the answer to that question might potentially be, which is usually that's the hypothesis, what I think it could possibly be. It's okay if I'm wrong. I'll find out when I'm done with this paper. And who I think would benefit from a possible answer to my question. So that's my second draft right there. For me, it was about a page long. So now I'm going to move into talking about my sources. And what we're going to focus on first is that transition between talking about who it might impact and my question and my experience, to now talking about other people's opinions. And so there's a couple ways you can do this. Now there's transitionary phrases that you can use, right? And so, that can work for some of us. You can say next, second, third, fourth. Those are okay. They're not the best way to transition, but they get you moving. So you can use something like that. So I could always say next, I decided to explore several opinions. And notice that, you know, I'm talking about what is coming up next, right? So it's always to guide the reader to better understand what's happening. Let's see if I can't blow this up a little bit more. Yeah. So there's that way, right? Just take a transitionary word or phrase and start going into it. So I could say several opinions. One of those opinions came from an article titled, and I have all the information I need here, right here in my notes, right? So I can come back to my notes and let me make it manageable and start like figuring out, okay, what's the title of this thing? I have it here somewhere. And if I don't, I can go pick up my reading. So I did save my reading. So there's my reading, Assessing Students' Minds. And I'll just come back and I like to paste it in because that's the title. I need to fix it up a little bit just so it's kind of smooth. By, and I include the author's name. I'll find it. Here it is. Olga Shafieva. Come back to my writing and right. So I can start like that, and then it's got me in. But I can also start with a little bit more intended purpose. And so I like to start with how I'm using, or what's like the reason behind why I'm using the source. Because I think, and I mentioned this in class, unless you were affected by the blackout, but one of the biggest mistakes students make is they just start writing about their sources in the order that they found them. And that's super dangerous because you didn't find them in any unique order. They were just randomly thrown out to you. And you have to start thinking about like, well, what is the first one you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about, depending on what they're about, do you want to talk about a problem and then a solution if one offers a problem? Like, what was your reason for reading them? What did you discover? And how did you actually puzzle piece them together? Sometimes the second one you read is the first one you talk about, or, vice versa. So something to think about is, who do you want to start with? Now, my purpose for starting with this first source, is that he starts to talk about the standardized test as a problem. Excuse me, as a problem. And he kind of also gives a little bit of a background historical context for them. And I like that. I want to start with that. I want to tell my readers, look, here's where standardized tests kind of came from, and here's the problem behind them. And then I want to move into my next source, which talks about potential solutions. So for me, that organization makes sense. But the source that I'm talking about first is not the one that I found first. It's actually the one I found second. So I had to think about the organization. It matters. So think about yours, and then use your reason for having that source in your paper as a way to transition into it. For example, let's see. I wanted to explain the historical context behind standardized tests and the problem with them. To do this, I explored the article titled, this is just another way of starting. I'm going to show you two different ways to start. Assessing Student Minds. So that's another way to start. And, as you look at them, you're like, interesting. And then, of course, there's another way to start that I want to show you, which is you take the last sentence or the last thought, the last thing you were discussing in the last paragraph, you repeat it in your first sentence moving into the next paragraph, and you move into new information. You move into the new thing you're going to talk about. This creates a much smoother transition because you're just reminding your audience, hey, remember we were talking about that, but now we're heading this way. And so here I said, hope teachers can rethink teaching toward the test and help students who have failed not take it so personally. So I was talking about teachers need to change the way they teach to help teachers understand how important it is to reconsider how they teach to the test. I wanted to share the ideas I discovered in an article titled, all right, Assessing Student Minds by the author Volker Shafieva. So these are 3 different introductory sentences that move me, and sorry, the transitionary sentences that move me from talking about what I was talking about to my secondary sources. And let's just look at them for a moment, because I think this is interesting. I like having options. Like I like writing things 3 different ways, because you know I can choose the best one. So this one goes next. I decided to explore several opinions. One of those opinions came from an article titled, this will just kind of quickly use this next to get in there and head into what I'm going to talk about next. This one, it's okay. It doesn't really get into as much depth. It's kind of vague and it's just moving along, but there's nothing there. These other 2 do a really good job of guiding the reader, because they explain more about what the purpose behind that source is. This is really strong writing in these 2. I don't like this one for my writing because it doesn't guide the reader as effectively. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and delete that one. And I just got to pick between these 2. So they're a little bit different. This is talking about what I want to do specifically. And this one is really focusing on my audience. And as you know, it just depends on how you want to do this. For me, I'm very audience focused, so I actually really like that second or that last one. So I think that's going to be the one that I lead in with to my next portion. But it's entirely up to you. I would definitely go with more specific driven stuff. Like, what is it that you intend to do to lead you into your source, or what is it that you want your audience to get out of it? I want to talk about 2 more things. Is if you notice, I named the title of the article that I was talking about, I'm about to talk about, and I also named the author. A big mistake students make is they'll say something like, a lot of times students will go like, to help teachers understand, you know, why it's so important to read how they teach the test, I want to share the ideas I discovered in my first source. This is a big no. You don't want to do that. And the reason that you don't want to do that, I want to highlight it in red, is because look how much information was lost. And you know, now you go from the previous one told you exactly what the title was, exactly who the author was. It gave you all the information you needed to know. This one then gives you absolutely no information. You don't know what my first source is. You don't know what I'm actually talking about. So you don't want to do this. Don't talk about your sources as first source, second source, third source. Consistently name the authors, name the articles. That's going to make your writing significantly stronger. So I'm just going to go back if I don't like that. That looks way better. I'm going to stop it here. I'm going to do another ride along. This time we're going to talk about how to include a little bit of background information on the author. So we're going to go into this discussion of credibility next. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next one.